Resume. We have a lot signed up. I know a lot of people sign up and then want to just listen to the recording, but we are still just a minute ahead of the actual start time. But I figured I'd hop on here since some of you have been sitting here waiting for a little while. And I know if anybody like myself might be excited to watch the national championship game, I might have snuck in there for a few minutes to catch a little bit of it. Not necessarily a fan of either team. My team got knocked out, Clemson, in the first round. I am a Furman Paladin, but big Clemson fan. But I did want us to get started here in just a minute, but thought I would hop on as we have some more joining. And then I'm going to flip over and share my screen again and go through this short-ish little webinar about getting started with the process. I will The first slide is a little bit of my kind of about me kind of thing. Also about me, my desk always stays messy, so we have a lot of messiness going on. And the other about me that is not as important that I'll kind of share while everybody else is hopping on, which they're actually not in the office with me, is also foster dogs, as well as having my own too. This is actually the least amount of dogs I have in my house right now, which is three. So at any point in time, it can always be a little chaotic. They usually sit right behind my office or right behind my computer on my little couch that I have here in my office. They're actually in there on the couch in the living room, having their own little watch party, watching the game right now. So, but they still at any time could bark and go crazy. So I always have to warn of that when I do any webinars or calls or anything. Again, like I said, right now I actually only have one foster and then my two rescue dogs. But that is another little tidbit about me. But anyways, we are right at a minute after 8. So I'm going to go ahead and flip back over to share the PowerPoint. It's going to take us through a couple of the initial steps of the process and then dive into that. And then we'll kind of wrap things up. And then I'll give you some ways to reach out if you do have questions. If you want to type any questions into the chat box, I'll do my best to answer them. Sometimes if you have specific questions, it's really hard for me to answer them on these. But if you do have some, I'll try to answer them. If not, I will just kind of refer you to, hey, sign up for the initial free call that you get with me as a national PKB member. Or if you just want to shoot me an actual email, I'll do my best to answer it that way. But we're gonna pop back over here. Let me share. Hang on one second. Let me get it back up here. Just a second. Well, now I gotta share. All right. There we go. All right. So we'll get past this one. This is a little bit of me, my family, one of my dogs, two of my most recent foster dogs down in the right, and just a little bit about me. So for those who maybe haven't been on a previous webinar or at a PKB on-site event, don't know anything about me, I live here in Greenville, South Carolina. Grew up in this area my whole life, been in this area. Played golf and grew up in South Carolina playing golf. I played at Furman University, member of the Furman University Athletic Hall of Fame. Had a pretty good college career. Kind of took me until late junior year, senior year to really kind of get in my groove before I really started playing well. Had always planned, always wanted to play professional golf from the time I was a wee little girl, 8, 9 years old. That's where I always wanted to go. Actually, where I always wanted to play college golf was at Furman. Clemson did not have a women's golf team. I was a huge Clemson fan. Grew up in a big Clemson family. They did not have women's golf. Furman was also a very well-known women's golf program for its LPGA players. That's what I always wanted to do as a kid. Was a pretty big athlete, played volleyball, played basketball as well, but golf, that's what I wanted to do. But played well enough to really feel like I could do that. Actually finished run-up U.S. Women's Am going into my senior year, gave me exemption into the U.S. Women's Open that summer, stayed amateur, then turned professional, went to LPGA school for my first try. Actually got full LPGA status that very first year. Played 2003, was my LPGA rookie year. Did not play great, only made a few cuts. And so for the next 6, 7, 8-ish years, was back and forth, had what's now the Epson Tour, played, had a couple good years out there, finished top 10, got some LPGA status back for 2008, 2009 season, played back out there a little bit, but just never quite could stay out there enough, stay consistent enough to just really get it done. Went back, played a couple US Opens again. But again, just couldn't, just missed keeping my status for LPGA Tour by one spot on the money list in 2009. And that's when I actually had really connected with one of the larger college recruiting services out there and was learning a little bit about this business. Realized after about a year and a half of working with them, I did not like the recruiting service side of things. The bigger business, the big sports, the service, pay to have your information sent out. I didn't like that. But there was a couple other guys that had consulting business that did it a little more one-on-one, helping you do the process. So I started my own business 2011, started Brandi Jackson Golf 2012, started partnering with the Peggy Kurt Bell Girls Tour, and 14 years later now, I guess it is, here I am. I've been doing this since then. Only work with the girls now, almost halfway through, not quite halfway through my business. Switched over to work full time just with the girls and just with the women's college coaches. So that's what I spend all of my time doing, is both sides of that. Spent a lot of time getting to know the women's coaches. I'd already knew a lot of them. That's why I really did what I did, and really wanted to focus on that. So work with the girls through the process, helping them connect with the coaches, mentoring them, taking them through the process, along with player development, personal development, professional development that comes along with all of that. So a little bit about me. There's actually a lot more branched into all of that, the business and what I do and everything, but just so you kind of know a little bit of me and who's back here behind the screen talking to you all. So, but here's kind of what we're going to talk about today or tonight. Kind of 5 areas to cover. Just touch on a few things. One of the toughest parts about this process, my 2 favorite words are always, it depends. Right now, we are in some big changes going on. We're going to touch on that a little, but again, a lot of that is also still very pending, a lot of stuff right now. So I'm going to try to kind of talk about it, but also we're still waiting on some decisions to be made. But just going to kind of cover the first part of the process. So we're not going to get into the second half. We'll do another webinar about that. So if you are farther along, make sure you catch that part, that process, or sorry, that webinar when we do it. Or again, great chance to sign up for your free 30-minute. Actually, the free 30-minute intro to the process kind of actually goes over these steps and then talks about whether we'd want to work together or not. Those ongoing steps of the process become so specific to you and individualized that it's really kind of hard to talk a lot about those ongoing steps, but we will cover a few of those as we wrap up. But first of all, again, understand the NCAA rules, talk a little bit about scholarships, kind of the standards for what coaches look for with scores and that kind of thing. Talk a little bit about putting your resume and video together, and then that initial coach contact. So a few things to do from an NCAA kind of eligibility standpoint is go register at the Eligibility Center. 10th, 11th grade, as you're starting to get into the process, you can go ahead and start building what's their like free profile. You can do that without ever having to initially go ahead and pay. That way, if you do end up playing D3, go to an NAIA school, or just don't play college golf, you never actually have to pay to get cleared through the Eligibility Center, but you can go ahead and start building your profile and start doing that to get your Eligibility Center number. There does come a point you have to pay if you're going to play D1 or D2 golf. And so then you do move into their actual verified profiles and that kind of stuff. But helps to go ahead. Lots of information as well that you'll find there too. So one thing to make sure that you do as you start getting into the process is going ahead and getting that profile initially started and registered. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring these up. Taking the ACT, SAT, it's definitely become one of those it depends things. Obviously, for one, NCAA does not require it anymore from an eligibility perspective. January of 2023, they officially quit saying it is part of their requirements. There's no more sliding scale that they used to have. Um, so it's not required anymore. But schools, as you're seeing in an academic side of applications process is much different than a college recruiting side of things because you don't know what schools you're going to be considered by golf wise. So you can't just handpick the ones that you plan to apply to. And then within that, you don't know where you're gonna get the support. Do you need to have the really good test scores to get in on your own? Is the school test optional? Um, I've even had some places that the school doesn't require tests, but then the coaches have wanted that and they've needed it early, especially the top academic schools. So this has been a little difficult, tricky piece of the process. Do you need to even take it at all? Do you still need to take it early? Do you need to worry about getting a really high score? And then come to find out you do all this and it doesn't even matter because the school you're going to, it wasn't even required. So some changes there, but for the most part, especially if you're looking to go to a better academic school or you want to give yourself the best chance, it is go ahead and take at least one of them. Try to get the best score you can. It's only going to help you. It's only going to give you the advantage if at all possible. Definitely a lot of players I have seen that have done it and get in touch with coaches early and have got that score in. It's only going to help you in that case, especially doing it prior. I put take before spring of junior year, but to be honest, we're really actually looking more at summer before junior year if you really want to be able to do it before the process really starts going into that summer, going into your junior year, that June 15th date. The next slide will talk about the importance of that June 15th date. But if you actually really want to, that would actually be taking it spring of sophomore year. A handful of players will do it, and that's where they're actually really starting to capture the attention of the top academic schools, some of your Ivy Leagues. Already taken it, gotten a really, really high score, can check the box that they can get in and get cleared. It's getting super, super competitive within that. So in some cases, if you really are at that elite academic level and you feel good enough about taking it sophomore year and getting a high enough score, you will really put yourself ahead of some other players to get recruited by top D3, top academic schools, Ivy Leagues, that sort of thing. It's getting very, very competitive at that level. So again, dates to know, June 15th, prior to 11th grade / junior year. That is the first time D1 coaches. So D2 is a little different. I like to try, I mean, not that it's all about playing D1, but that's typically when the only one that kind of matters because it's usually kind of the start of the process. D2 coaches are a little different. D3 coaches don't really have, sorry, I kind of said that fast. D3 coaches don't really have to follow the rules because they don't have athletic scholarship they're giving out. But D1 coaches, starting June 15th, that is the first time that they can send emails, reply to your emails, make and receive phone calls, send text messages, any other kind of electronic communication with you as the student athlete, your parents, theoretically, your coach. They are allowed before then to do some communication with your swing coach, somebody like myself actually as well. They're allowed some communication there, but they can't have like recruiting conversations with that coach. They can just kind of maybe ask a little bit about their game, stuff like that, but they're not really allowed to say to your swing coach or to somebody like myself, hey, we really have her on our top of our list. We're going to make an offer or something like that. They're just not allowed to have recruiting emails or recruiting conversations with your coach. They can't have any conversations at all, no communication with you as player or parent at all prior to June 15th. I probably shouldn't put your coach. I probably should take that off because they're somewhat allowed to talk to a swing coach or somebody third party. But parents, student athletes, no communication at all prior to June 15th. And so that's the kickoff to the process. That's when everybody kind of looks forward to it. It's definitely very top heavy, top ranked D1 programs, top ranked juniors see the most activity. Some players don't see any activity at all. Some see maybe a little bit, doesn't really go very far. You just continue to play, try to get better, try to maybe adjust your reach, just keep working on your game, and you know that the process is just going to take a little bit longer. It's going to go more throughout all of junior year, and you're going to find yourself still in the process spring of junior year, as most players have a tendency to do. It doesn't look that way from an outsider's perspective, but when you really dive into the process and see it, that's really what usually happens. But then on August 1st, so a month and a half later, August 1st of your junior year, that's when official and theoretically unofficials, they're again another kind of confusing part of the process, but visits are allowed starting on August 1st. So up until that point, you're not allowed to have any actual in-person contact with the coach. If you go on campus prior to that time, you can't meet with the coach. You can go visit campus all you want to and drive around. You can take the academic tour, but you can't actually do anything with the coach until August 1st. Same thing if you run into a coach at a tournament, you can't talk to them until starting on August 1st. That June 15th to August 1st, all that can be is electronic communication, video chats, text messages, phone calls, all of that during that time. So then you can start making off-campus contact as well as the on-campus visits. The difference in unofficial, official visits definitely gets very tricky. Why do you get one versus another? Very situationally based, can be very confusing, can lead to a lot of misunderstandings for, well, this coach offered me an official, they must like me more. Not necessarily always the case. That's a definitely discussion for a whole different kind of level of not for a different day, not but I mean it is very situationally based for budget reasons, just for a lot of different things for why one thing happens, why would you maybe want to ask for a visit to be not considered official, different things like that. But again, that's just a little complicated thing these days for official and unofficial visits. But okay, talk about scholarships. So I've left this up because this is how scholarships have been for the last who knows how many years, which is the old will continue to potentially for all of D2, D3, NAIA, JUCO, and what we are being told, some of D1 schools will continue to operate this way for scholarships. So D1, some D1 schools will continue with 6 scholarships. Again, the next slide, I'm going to talk about it to the degree I can and it be somewhat accurate. D2 should continue with a max of 5.4. D3s are academic money only. So don't take that, though, to mean that's such a negative thing. It's just they are academic only. NAIA schools are allowed a max of 5 scholarships, and JUCOs allowed a max of 8. So here's where it gets the tricky thing going on right now. So first, I'm going to touch on some new things going on and just give you the most recent updates. We were told January was potentially going to be the new vote, the decision that was going to at least totally clarify everything, but I've not heard anything recent to officially decide anything. But as of right now, and all of the most recent info that I have still continued to be told, which is still extremely complicated, is all of D1 has kind of the option, and it's not a team decision, not a sport decision, it's the entire athletic department, and in some cases it's a conference-wide decision. In some cases, some conferences allowed each school to make their own decision, and then other cases the conference as a whole made a decision as to whether they were going to opt in or opt out of what's considered this whole revenue share thing. I'm not going to go into what all that means, but the main thing that it comes down to is if you opt in, then you are now going to be under what's going to be this like roster cap, which for women's golf is going to be either 8 or 9 That number has continued to change. And again, that's possibly even going to be a conference decision as well. But it will make it either 8 or 9, which is the number. There's no, this is where it starts to get complicated. People get confused, but that is the maximum allowed on the team, no matter what. Now, it does allow teams to fund scholarships up to that number, but just as you see below, not all teams are fully funded. They never were not all teams were fully funded prior to this, and you're still going to see that be the case. So just because a team is capped at 8 and they're allowed 8 scholarships, just like before, where you had 6 scholarships and teams didn't fund all 6 scholarships in some cases, you're still going to run into the fact that, you can't have more than 8 girls. Even if you're allowed 8 scholarships, they may still stay at the 6 scholarships that they've always had. And they just now spread it out, but they only spread it out among 8. Whereas prior, they could have 10 girls if they wanted to. Now they're not allowed more than 8 girls. Still got 6 scholarships just like before. But again, they can only have no more than 8 girls because their athletic department opted in. And so they are working on the roster cap deal that they're under now, basically. Um, it's about as simple as I can kind of make it, because we get questions. What does that mean? Walk-ons. You can't go above that 8, but again, you're still not funding all 8 spots. Theoretically, you will still have partial scholarships, that kind of thing within that. So yeah, if a coach wanted to say, hey, I'm going to give 6 full scholarships and then 7 and 8 could theoretically be considered a walk-on if a coach wanted to do it that way. So yeah, you could still have quote unquote walk-ons in that case, because they're not necessarily going to fund up to 8 scholarships. If that sort of makes sense. I don't want to overcomplicate this, but I just want to sort of get people to understand. So that's if you opt in. And again, there's still tricky stuff, what the number is going to be, what it all really looks like. But on the flip side of that, certain conferences, certain schools are just saying, hey, we don't have the money to revenue share, which is, again, that's a complicated term and what all that means. So we're opting out of this, which basically means you just keep operating as normal. You can't have more than what those scholarships were that I just showed. So for women's golf, you stay at 6 anyways. You can't increase that. You can have as many as you want to on the roster. Obviously you can't revenue share, which is the whole thing too as well. But nothing changes. So that's where things have stood most recently. Unless NCAA and the whole lawsuit and all this stuff says something's not going to work as far as that goes. That's what it's supposed to be. Of course, the ones opting in are mostly your Power Four conferences, with a handful of next tier mid-major programs that want to, mostly because of a football or a basketball team wanting to be able to do it, and that filters down into your smaller programs as well that have to do it too. So a little bit of insight on that. But again, just as I mentioned in the next thing, one of the biggest misconceptions is that even before, when you had 6 scholarships at D1, not all teams fund all 6 scholarships. Some don't even have any scholarships. Some work off of 1 scholarship. Some may only have 4 of their scholarships funded. So that's where there's a big misconception out there in general, that there's all this money and everybody's going to get all this golf money. A lot of coaches rely on giving academic money and combining it. And then there's some cases where you can't stack academic and golf, and you have to either take just the academic money that you get. So while a full golf ride and what is considered a full golf is more common among females, a true full golf ride is still a whole lot harder to come by than most people realize. A lot of people who go on full scholarships, if you actually ask what it is, it's actually a combo of academics and golf in a lot of cases. It's just a full ride. It's just combined together, because if you're pretty good academics and you can get academic money, majority coaches are still going to try to get you that if possible. So just something, again, a little bit of info there. Obviously, the more realistic you are, so if you really need scholarship money, and that's a big thing, if you're really stretching yourself for schools that are way out of your range, and you really are like, oh, I really want to go to these schools, and no, it's not good enough, and then you say, hey, and I need scholarship money, you are trying to put square peg, round hole, making things really difficult. So the more realistic you are, the better chance you're gonna get golf scholarship and even academic money, because the coach is going to help pull maybe some more academic money for you if they really want you golf wise as well. Which is also why I talk about D3 schools being a great opportunity. You'd be surprised at what D3 schools can offer financially, even if it is under the academic window of things. They can still offer some pretty good financial aid from an academic standpoint as well. So this is a very broad range. Some people like to nitpick this sometimes, or why this, why that. This used to be a lot more detailed, then I really tried to simplify it. You can look at this, screenshot it if you want to, but this is a very simplified. The next slide's going to talk a little bit about it. Just standards from a tournament scoring average, the distances coaches like to see, sort of how you would finish in tournaments. But I mean, we're talking, this is very broad, very general. For top D1, low D1 scores, top D2, you can kind of tell top D2 really actually kind of sneaks in and very similar to what a mid D1 program looks like. And that's really how strong top D2 programs have gotten. Um, Top D3 is actually pretty competitive. People would kind of underestimate it, but top D3 can fit in there. One of the biggest things you run into, and that's where there's always going to be exceptions to things too, is some of these programs can get one girl maybe who fits what these, the lower end of these numbers, but they're not going to have 8 or 9 girls on the team that can do it like a top D1 program. So as you'll see on the next slide, there's going to be exceptions, but sometimes you got to think about, who was this exception that you've heard about that was the girl that never got to play, that got the last minute spot, or that went on no scholarship, but yet you're the person who needs the scholarship or talks about how you want to go somewhere where you can play, and you're trying to compare yourself to that exception to the rule that is the, last person that plays 2 tournaments a year on that team that really isn't good enough to be on the team. That, yeah, there are exceptions to all of these, because again, different scenarios where teams are not going to get 8 of those people that fit in this range. And especially in different scenarios, that's why, lower D1s, can maybe get one girl that shoots 73, 74, and then, yeah, they're going to have their last teams. And other exceptions, the Northeast teams are a little bit different than the Southeast teams, even if from a rankings perspective, it still kind of comes out that way. But so things to know as far as those go. First of all, handicap means really nothing in the recruiting process. Absolutely nothing, because as far as coaches know, you're putting in practice scores. Handicap, don't even bother it. Sorry, outside of needing to use it for applications to some amateur tournaments. It means nothing to tell a coach what your handicap is. It is more about like tournament scores or your junior golf scoreboard, like scoring differential, which that even has some skewed to it. I really, at the end of the day, what's your tournament scoring average? As long as it is legit and you're not pulling out tournaments, that's a tournament scoring average is how legit is it? I mean, of course, and also more than just a few scores at those numbers that I'm looking at as far as the standard. So you can't just say, well, my last 3 tournaments is 75, so I can go to these schools. No, it doesn't quite look like that. It's got to be more than just a few scores at those numbers, and then the strength of tournaments and the overall experience of that, not just with my last few tournaments, I've shot these numbers. So, hey, I can go here, especially when, again, you're looking at higher level programs. They need to see those numbers over length of time, strength of the tournaments you're playing in. With that, what's your overall experience? Okay, so you're shooting those numbers, but that's just mostly high school local events versus, state national tournaments that you're shooting those numbers at. The earlier you reach those standards, the more options you're going to have for programs like the top D1 schools who are identifying recruits as early as 8th and 9th grade. The later you reach those standards, the more likely those programs have already passed you in the recruiting process. And then you do have to be a little more realistic that, okay, I'm just now getting to 75, 76 as a junior. That doesn't do you a whole lot of good, unfortunately, for top D1 programs who by, midway through junior year have had a tendency to potentially already finish up a lot of top D1 that top D1 recruiting. So to get there then and just start shooting those numbers, a lot of times that process is kind of past you. And as I mentioned, there are definitely exceptions at all division levels, but you just really got to put in perspective what that means when we talk about those exceptions. Um, Okay, somebody did just ask, is a scholarship the, I do want to answer this. This is a good question. Is a scholarship the only way to play on a college golf team? I mean, you don't have to have a scholarship to be on the college, I mean, on a team, especially a golf scholarship. Again, you've got plenty of girls who are on teams that are just on academic money, who are not on scholarship, especially when you get into programs that are not funded. That again, they're on their own money, or like I said, maybe only qualified for academic money or financial need or completely just paying their own way. So you don't necessarily have to be on scholarship to play on a team. You definitely don't have to be on golf scholarship to be on a team because, again, in some cases, there are programs out there who are literally working on one scholarship for the whole team. And so, some cases they don't give any of the girls money and you're going to go. I mean, there's some mid-major D1 programs. There's a couple of mid-major D1, lower D1 programs that where there's a private school can't stack money. So by saying you can't stack money, you can't combine golf and academic together. So you couldn't do 30% golf, 40% academic and make it 70%. The school doesn't allow you to do it. So if you're really, really good golfer, the coach may say, hey, you're the player I'm going to give a 60% golf scholarship to or whatever. And of course, you would probably that, but say you maybe not, but you're a pretty good student, you're going to qualify for 40% academic, then you're going to take the 40% academic, but that's all you're going to get is the 40% academic. So of course, on a team like that, you've got a lot of your girls who are only on academic money because they can't be on a combination of both. All right, so dive into a couple pieces of the actual process. And let's see what we got here. So talk a little bit about building the resume, what that looks like, and then the initial contact with coaches. All right, so resume. What to include? Very briefly going to talk about this. I'm going to show you a couple of examples. This is something definitely here to help everybody with. There are some ways you can pay for some online ways of doing this if you just want to do it that way. But this is just a quick little list of some things to include. Resumes can be kind of tricky because there are some things that you don't have to include. That's the whole thing about this process. There, I always kind of joke about, or not joke, I always use this reference of there's this whole area of okay middle ground that's enough. And then there's a whole area of way too much over here, and then not enough, or over the top, and then, way under the radar kind of thing. You want to find this happy medium ground because kind of same thing with resume. But this is most of the info that at a minimum need to try to have. Of course, within this, it gets kind of tricky. What does the resume need to look like? All of that. Somebody asked, what does it mean by social media? Okay, hang on. These are a couple good. This is one good question. So again, if these are good questions, I do want to answer them. The sixth scholarship is that per year. So the sixth scholarship is basically at any one time. So okay, just so if nobody can see these questions, I'll repeat. So somebody asked, is the sixth scholarship per year? So that is basically at any given time on that team, the scholarship total adds up to six. So of all the girls on the team at that time, between freshmen and seniors, the total scholarship amount at that time will be no more than six scholarships. So not necessarily, I mean, it is kind of per year, but it's spread out among those four current years of players can't be more than six total scholarships for that particular academic year spread out among all of the current players on the team. And then the 8-cap roster is over 4 years college. So when I say 8-cap roster, I mean that is 8 players, 8 girls on the team. That basically means same thing. At any given time per year, you can't have more than 8 girls on the team. So that's per year, every year, basically. So year to year until they make any kind of changes, 8 girls on a current roster year to year for how many every years that, every year basically is what that means. So the 8 cap roster of 8 girls or 9, it may be 9. Again, that's been the 2 different numbers. Whichever one that is. So that's not just 4 years of college. I mean, yeah, if your daughter is there for 4 years, each year there will be no more than that for her 4 years. However, they're now going to 5 years of eligibility. Again, NCAA loves to throw things out there. That's a whole different thing, waiting on all of that to play itself out. So I don't want to talk about that just yet either. But yeah, if your daughter would be there for 4 years, of course, all of her 4 years, that was what it is. But in general, it is just now going to be a roster max of that. And then somebody asked, what does it mean by social media? It just means put yourself, like if you've got Instagram's the biggest one. Just put what that is on your so for me, mine's at Brandi Jackson Golf. Just put that on there. Coaches like to follow you on social media if you have social media. So just put that on your resume so that a coach knows how to go follow you on your social media. Just put the handle on there, basically. What is a tournament resume? Tournament resume is just your tournament results. So your scores, tournament name, date. I'm going to show you here in just a second, actually, so you'll know what it means. So I'm going to skip that question. So I'm going to show you. How to format. A couple different ways. A simple PDF document format. I have a lot of my girls now are very familiar with using Canva. I work with them on how to create one on Canva. I love teaching them how to do things themselves. That's my job, not to do it for them, to help them learn how to do this stuff. I'm here to help them do it, show them how to do it, teach them how to do it. So we use Canva a lot of times. Sometimes they opt to just go pay for the junior golf scoreboard. They have a resume. It's a couple $100s per year, but it is just a resume online. You can go plug all your stuff in. They will actually populate all of your tournament results. So you don't have to do that, especially if you haven't been keeping up with it. As long as it's a junior golf scoreboard ranked event, they actually pull that up for you. So junior golf scoreboard is a online resume service that you can pay for. That's one of the ones that if you're gonna go that option, I recommend, mainly because it doesn't then tie you into any like recruiting service or anything like that. It's just a standalone part of the rankings kind of thing. And then if a coach does go to your rankings on junior golf scoreboard, they can click on your name and find your resume as well. Or you can do your own website if you want to. That's kind of gotten a little more out of date there for a long time. When I first started this, that was a really good way to do them. I think now that's kind of gotten, I think, a little more out of date, just in general. Websites almost, it's kind of funny. That was the way to do stuff for a long time. Now that's actually gotten a little more overdone, maybe. I don't know what the word is. I think the PDF side of things is actually just gone back. It's a little, because of things like Canva allows you to make them look good, better than just like a document. Or I'm actually working with somebody potentially to come up with another good online system to do them. But again, biggest thing is making it very easily accessible, complete with everything it needs. Thing that most people do is they don't have the info that coaches need. They don't put, it's amazing how many resumes when I first meet with a family or just talking to college coaches, how many resumes don't have those tournament results, don't put tournament scores. They'll talk about all these, I finished second in this one or third in that one and all of this. And they don't have any actual scores. Coaches have to see scores, but some of those things that frustrate coaches, how many times they just don't get what they need from a resume. But very neat, easily accessible, and has the information that they need. All right, another little question. Again, if these questions pop up and I think they're good info for everybody, I'll answer them. Somebody just asked, if you're offered a scholarship, would you still have to send an application to the school? Good question. It is a good, it depends one. Because it will be based on, just because you're offered a scholarship, it doesn't always mean you get the academic support for being accepted to that school. So this is a very side note to what we're talking about right now, everybody. So sorry that this is a little sidetracked, but I'll answer this really quick. But if you are offered a scholarship, to a school, then you typically do still go through the application process no matter what. If you do have the support from, or you're tagged as a recruited athlete, a lot of times it's just a formality. And you're literally just applying just because you have to. But in other cases, even if you're offered the scholarship or whatever that might be, there's not always going to be the academic support, and you're actually having to apply and still having to get in without that. There's variations there of what that looks like based on the school and how they handle athletes and where you are on that coach's list for being supported as a recruited athlete or not. D1, D2, D3 is all different. D3 definitely handles things a little bit different. Higher academic schools sometimes handle them a little different. Coaches sometimes only have so many applicants that they can support their admissions, especially like Ivy Leagues and stuff like that. So it will vary within that, but you usually do still send in an application. It's just a matter of where the support is as to how much that application is just, hey, this is just a formality, we got to do it, or do I actually have to seriously apply and still get in on my own, even though that scholarship might be there. Sometimes the scholarship's pending. Hey, if you get in, this is what you're being offered. So that can kind of vary. So, all right, let me get through knocking this out. So this is a 2-page left, right page of one that we've kind of built that looks a lot like what we do. Left side's got a lot of the bulleted info of what we talked about over there. The right side is kind of what I would call a tournament resume. So last couple of years of results. Again, I'm shortening this, so you see a lot of empty bulleted points just because I'm just not. This is a very shortened version of not including everything. Those bulleted points would have stuff. The personal statement would have something. I just left that blank, but you would continue on with like where I have 2023 results. You would put all of your 23 results, all of your 2022. So now that we're 2025, that would be 2024 results, most all your 2022 results, and then just some previous year highlights. You could, however you want to do that, put the dates. But the biggest thing is the dates, the yardage. Now, there's another way you could do more of like a chart. You could have it in like columns with the tournament date, name, results. And if you want to have a little chart, a little section that talks a little bit about the conditions. Some coaches say, hey, I love when you give me that it was rainy or windy or something. Some coaches don't like that. Again, another tough part about this process. Coaches are different. What one coach says they love, another coach says, I don't like to get it. You never know. I hate this. I hate that as much as anybody. Literally, I've been at a coach panel where 2 coaches have said the complete opposite about something. But yeah, some coaches are like, I don't need to know the weather, like whatever. And literally another coach just said, yeah, I like when you give me the weather conditions and you tell me it was like 30-mile-an-hour wind, or, the first day rained, or, whatever it was. So you could do a chart, or you could put in parentheses, day 1, super windy, you just, sometimes if you put too much, you go in, you do that on all of them, it just starts to kind of take away from things if you do too much. Biggest thing you can see the scores. That's what coaches really need to see. Then they start diving into, okay, what kind of tournaments is she playing in? What are the distances she's playing? Is she getting, or they're going to go to your junior golf scoreboard, or they're going to Google more tournaments, or whatever it might be. So this is just a good layout of a resume. And then this, if you did do something online, you can go to Wix.com. This would be a way to do one. Those would be your different tabs you'd want to have, maybe keeping it simple to be a way to do something if you built, like I said, Wix.com, Webs.com, you can build one for free. You can go in and have your own .com if you want to. It is an option as well, for sure. A little bit about a swing video. Great to have on a resume for sure. Coaches love to see that. Couple of things. You can do it, a little bit and get away with having plenty of what you need. You can do just some full swings, front on, down the line, just similar to what a swing coach would be filming of your swing. You can add short game and putting as well. I always recommend having a really good player introduction at the beginning. You can do it at the range, out on the golf course. Obviously, right now, a lot of y'all are indoors, so you can do it indoors right now, especially if you're current junior, maybe even a sophomore, and you really need to get some stuff, start sending stuff out. That's okay to do it indoors. Maybe update something later once you're back outdoors. I always say no more than about 3 or 4 minutes max, because coaches don't have a lot of time to watch stuff. Um, if you do it, you do it with your swing coach, or you do something and you put the TrackMan or flight scope data that's on there, or if you put something like that that's on your resume. Again, some coaches love all that. They love to see the numbers. They like the numbers, the data. Again, you can put that and list it on your resume. You can have that as part of your video if you're able to make it work and it all flows right. You can certainly do it that way as well. Just depends on your level of technology, being able to do it, make it work, and it look good, and how you can do it as to being able to do that. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about getting into contact coaches, and then we're going to kind of wrap this up. So, contacting coaches. Starts with identifying schools, researching programs in schools, and taking notes. Of course, if you have no idea what to do, where to start from there, it can be very difficult. So again, those standards I showed you kind of give you an idea of maybe where to start as far as like division levels. And picking out the schools. I've got another little reference chart or a reference of some different ways to then look at the schools on one of my next pages. But using the standards, checking the rosters to help determine what's realistic. Keep in mind, coaches are not looking to replace their fifth player or the players that aren't playing, especially early into the process. So even right now for the 2026 class, most coaches are still trying to get the best players. They're trying to get better than what they currently have. The Furman coach, I met with him last week, and then I talked to him up at Pine Needles a couple weeks ago, and we were just talking. Him and I can just kind of talk all day about stuff, and we were talking about this, and he said, "Yeah," he's like, "I'm trying to get better than what I have." He's like, "I don't need what I've already got. Like, yeah, do I eventually maybe have to settle for something? But like right now, I'm trying to get better than what I have, or what I can predict that is going to be better than what I have." So you got to keep that in mind. So you got to go kind of look at what the second and third best player is shooting, and then also keep in mind they're in college golf. College golf is tough. It's tougher conditions. It's tougher courses, longer courses. So their scores are not comparable to kind of what you're doing in a little bit easier conditions as well. So you got to keep all that in mind. And start creating a list. I always kind of say 50 or more, because the truth is most everybody is still going to have a lot of unrealistic schools on their list. It's just human nature. It's just how most people create their list. And so if you're not careful and you only have a list of 10 or 15 or 20 or even sometimes 30, you just still don't give yourself a chance to get enough realistic schools on there to really start building what is going to be a list where you're actually going to get some interest back. Confidence goes down, you get frustrated, you're like, why does nobody want me? So at least if you can get yourself a chance to get some responses back, even if it's places that you're not interested in initially, you will just get a little bit of confidence. You'll feel better. Your game will start to improve too. Then you can start to kind of play around with your list a little bit more. Intro email. I've actually got a great quote here at the end too. Really been hitting up a lot of coaches with some stuff during a little bit of their downtime. And one of the coaches talked about, intro emails needing to be specific. That does not mean you just simply write the coach's first name and that's it. Stuff about the school. Why are you interested? That also means you don't just go back and say, great finish last week. That's one thing. Sometimes it's hard to really talk about why you're interested in schools if you really don't know why. I work with this a lot with my girls, of trying to come up with things, being a little bit unique with it. Because sometimes you are reaching out to places that you just don't know why you're interested yet. And sometimes you kind of have to kind of say that too. But really trying to make each intro specific and letting the coach know you've done your research and you've done your homework. It's not just generic. And then the email is very well written by you, reflects who you are as a student, an athlete, and a person. It's written by you as the student, as the athlete, as the person, not your parents. And also filling out the questionnaires as well. A lot of coaches say they would really like and prefer to have both. It takes a lot of time, but most all coaches have said, we want both. We do questionnaires for a reason, because a lot of times the resumes, the emails don't give us all of what we need. So we want the questionnaires. Sometimes the questionnaires are easier to file, but we also want players to do their own homework and do the emails and that kind of stuff too. So I polled coaches, and the majority said we want both. It's annoying, I know, but that is what most of them said. So getting those emails out and following up with some of the questionnaires. Few resources here. So collegegolf.com used to be the Ping College Golf Guide. Another guy who's got a similar business to mine bought it out once Ping sold it off or wasn't going to do it anymore. So it'll take you to more of his like, I'm not trying to be like, don't go use his service or whatever. I don't know much about that piece of it, but he did buy the rights to their search engine, which is a great search engine. So if you go to his site, there is a school search. So I still highly recommend that for searching for the golf programs and being able to narrow down. You can pick the states you want to look for. You can pick a lot of different parameters. It was not up to date and working very well as of a couple of months ago, even a few weeks ago. I most recently looked at it. I think he's got it all back together as it was back when it was the Ping College Golf Guide and it was an independent thing. But if you go to the site, you should be able to navigate around and find it. It's separate. It's part of his business, but it's separate from his business. So again, not trying to bash on him or anything about him at all, obviously. It's a competitor in that sense, but at the same time, we all work in this business, whatever. But that search engine used to be just a separate entity, but it is still a great search engine for college golf programs and what it does and how you can search stuff. Clipped, GolfStat, and Golf Week. There's big controversy about stuff with the rankings, but all three of them have rankings so that you can see where the golf programs are actually ranked, top, medium, low, that kind of stuff. College Board obviously is a great way to search search the schools for academics, and then of course the team and the school websites. And this was just the quote one of the coaches sent to me last week about, recruits doing their homework and how many don't do their homework and just send very generic emails. And that was one of the biggest turnoffs, basically. Or it was either a turnoff or it was one of the things that she really looks for in players in terms of communication and stuff. All right, before I go to here, I do have what I think might be a good question. So if a coach is looking to recruit a player that is better than their second or third best player and succeed in doing so, what happens to that current fifth best player? Do they get bumped down to sixth or seventh? And if so, does that impact the fifth player scholarship? So yeah, I mean, in theory, if a coach comes in and recruits a player that makes that top five, now keep in mind, I mean, the top five lineup consistently changes on most teams. So, I mean, especially that fourth, fifth spot changes out a lot. I mean, coaches do a lot of qualifying, a lot of ways for that fourth and fifth spot to continually change in and out. So rarely do you just have a set top five, but you do, again, you may have a good freshman that comes in that becomes a more consistent second or third place player. And that person that might have been sitting on that fifth place bubble that was maybe getting that because the team wasn't that strong gets bumped out and doesn't get to make the lineup as well. So that player better either step it back up or whatnot for that next year. But no, typically, and that's the thing about scholarships cannot be, again, we're living in some different ages of rules changing or whatever, but scholarships cannot be taken away but because of bad performance. Scholarships can only be reduced if you can prove like team rules have been completely like broken, misconduct, that kind of stuff. Otherwise, you have to show valid reason, and it cannot just be bad performance that scholarship gets reduced. You have to, otherwise you can actually appeal it and will typically win if if a coach reduces scholarship just out of not playing well. It has to be breaking team rules, legitimate behavioral things, stuff like that, for a scholarship to actually be removed. So normally it would not affect a scholarship or anything. But yeah, that player gets kind of bumped down. But again, that player could get bumped down for a couple of tournaments, but start playing well, qualify, and easily get back in and make the lineup for the next tournament. And so there's a constant like changing of the top five. And there's also individuals that play sometimes and go to tournaments and play as an individual as well, too. All right, so the last little bit is just kind of giving you what the last little bit of the process would be without kind of going into details of it. So continuing the process. So once you've gotten some intro emails out, again, depending on where you're at for sophomore year, obviously that's all you can do. But once you are past that June 15th date, or even as a sophomore, you want to still kind of do some follow-up emails as well, keeping them up to date on what you've got going on. They obviously just can't respond back. So maintaining that communication, that's a big thing. An initial email rarely gets anywhere. It typically is, you might, again, if you're past that June 15th date, you might get a few responses from an initial email, but a lot of times it takes a follow-up email. It sometimes takes numerous follow-up emails along with your game progressing a little bit too. Of course, at the end of the day, that's a big part of it. Your game's got to be where a coach wants to see, and it may be closed, but then it just takes some emails and really showing what you're doing and showing the effort you're putting in with the process and with your game before a coach really kind of catches up and says, you know, um, hey, this girl's really improving. She's really, they like the feedback about your tournaments. Again, I'm not getting way too much of that, but again, maintain communication, stay in touch. Social media is a great way to kind of do some stuff as well and kind of show off what you're doing that way too. Then potentially taking visits, continuing to engage and impress and really show who you are, make a good impression. And then getting into making your decision. Hopefully you've got some offers. You've got options to consider. That is where it does get tricky. That's a big part. Sometimes I've got players that, it's an easy thing. They get one offer to the place they want to go to, and that's it. We're one and done. Other times, it's a really tough thing to even maybe get the first offer to start that process, or you've got a few offers and they've got different timelines, and it's how do we ask for more time, whatever that might be. So then that decision part gets really tough. And then now it's a scholarship agreement. It's not an NLI. I actually had to go back in and change this before we got started. And then you sign that, and that kind of solidifies it, and you're locked in and ready to start your college golf career in a year from that. And then you're prepping for that basically at that point. And that's the end of one process, but you're agreeing to start a new process. Oh, I thought I had one more thing after that. But that's kind of the second half, the back end, the fun part. I mean, kind of the more fun part. The first part's kind of the tedious part of the process. And then that's is where it becomes a little more fun, but also can be the frustrating part. You get you can definitely get a lot of no's. You can get, the offer part, but it also hopefully becomes the exciting part too. But go back to this final page just in case you missed writing down any of my info. If you have any questions or anything, again, I do you can shoot me an email to this if you want to schedule PKB national members get the intro, which again, this was kind of what this is. We would do this kind of a little bit more specific to where you are in the process. And talk about whether or not you want to, work together through anything with any of the services that I offer, or you're looking for that kind of help. Shoot me a message. We can set that up. If you have any questions, I am going to stop sharing my screen. I know we got a couple of questions. Let me look at them and just see if they're, I'll answer these last couple of questions, try to do them real quick. And then if they are good ones right here, and then we'll sign off because we're pushing right about an hour. So let me see. Okay, making sure. Okay. Can a scholarship be given in a second or third year of college, being in the same school for golf, but not being on their team? Can a scholarship be given in a second or third year of college of being at the same school for golf and not being on their team? I'm not sure I understand that question. You might have to answer me, Hannah. I think maybe send me a different message. I don't follow that question, so I'm going to answer the other one, or shoot me an email. I don't understand that question. If you're offered a scholarship, then the coach finds a player that they're more interested in, could they take their offer back? So, I mean, theoretically, yes. I mean, that's where we talk about verbal offers. I will talk about that a little bit. This is a good thing. I do get asked this a good bit. So until that scholarship agreement is signed, which is fall of your senior year, November 9th, 10th, 11th, depending on how it falls, up until that point, scholarships are just strictly a verbal agreement between you and the coach. So numerous things can happen. The coach could leave, and then you may decide, hey, the coach is gone. I don't want to go to that school anymore. So you have the right to then do what you want to do if you want to. The new coach coming in may say, hey, I don't think this is a good fit. I'm not going to keep your scholarship offer. We're going to go a different way. Or things do change on both sides of the equation. I've had coaches feel like a player after they committed just wasn't working as hard, or grades dropped, scores just kind of dropped. And the coach just, it wasn't just because the player was just struggling, just felt like, it just wasn't going well. So yeah, theoretically, a coach can pull a scholarship offer up until the point that the scholarship agreement is signed. Once that's signed, not necessarily no. That is then the agreement between you and the university. The only way that can change is if, like, on your side of things, you ask to kind of get out of it. That's a whole different thing. But up to that point, a coach technically can. And I mean, yeah, there's sneaky ways that's happened. There's no doubt. It doesn't happen very often. For the most part, it's a very serious commitment on both sides. So both player and coach. I mean, I make it a very big thing with my players. If they're going to make a verbal commitment, take it serious. You're not going to do it and then turn around and be talking to other coaches or try to think that you're doing it, have something in your back pocket. Coaches take it very serious. They're not typically going to make an offer unless, again, they feel like you are really not upholding things on your end and something else, changes. So typically it does not happen that a coach finds a better player and takes an offer back. But it does. I'm not saying it doesn't happen at all. But again, that can go both sides. And then what if a student is starting tournaments in high school? I mean, if a player's just now starting tournaments in high school, I mean, I guess maybe the question is whether it's too late. Definitely not too late by any means. I mean, if you're just now starting to play, I mean, you've still got time to play enough tournaments and still play and build enough of a resume and still play college golf and everything. So if that's, I guess, the question, I mean, you certainly have still time, maybe not to play top D1. That would probably be pretty difficult because that typically is not quite going to probably be enough time to get to that level. But that was what that question was for. How far back should one go with regard to tournaments? I always say include everything from at least a year to maybe 2 years. Put it all on there. Now, if you play a lot, yeah, you can maybe pull off one or two of your worst tournaments if you're playing a lot. But if you're not playing very much and you start taking stuff off, you're taking off the experience you're getting. And experience is as much of a piece that coaches want to see too. They want to know you're getting experience. You're playing, you're getting the experience at different courses, different times a year, and all of that. So if you start pulling bad tournaments off and you get down to where you're only showing a handful of tournaments each year, but I say include most everything from the past year up to 2 years. And then after that, coaches don't really care a whole lot about what you've done past that. You could just throw some highlights or like you won this big tournament or anything past those, especially past 2 years. If you're at a college, I'm not on the golf team, can I receive a scholarship for golf after my freshman year? I mean, if you go try out for the team or get on the team, I mean, you can receive a scholarship after freshman year if you can make the team, and they offer you one. Yeah, you certainly can. If they allow tryouts or anything like that. Yeah, I mean, you definitely can if they allow for tryouts or you can earn a scholarship if they do allow tryouts or anything like that. Yeah. All right. I think that's it. If anybody has any other questions, you've got my email. But for now, we're going to wrap this up. Lots of great questions, though. I always love when we got good questions, and lots of engagement. I always enjoy that. Sometimes I feel like I sit here and talk, and I wonder who else out there. So it's always great to have good questions. So I am really glad to have everybody on here. I hope everybody enjoyed this. And then, like I said, if you want to set up your call, shoot me an email. I'll shoot you anything back to set that up. But otherwise, everybody have a great night. Almost everybody stay warm, because if you're anywhere in the country right now, I think it's cold. So everybody stay warm. Have a great night. And I hope to see you out maybe somewhere this spring if I'm out at an event. So take care.